Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions have a couple of needs they need to attack going into free agency. Most of them coming on the defensive side of the football, and one of the biggest needs this offseason is going to be acquiring a pass rushing defensive tackle and continuing to build depth and acquire talent at that position. And there's a lot of people out there that think the Lions should draft one early. There's a lot of people out there that think the Lions should spend big money on Daron Payne or trade up for Jalen Carter. And while those are certainly options, and those are certainly the exciting options, it's more likely that Brad Holmes sticks with his free agency strategy. Even coming right from the words of the general manager, Brad Holmes is going to be very selective about the players that he brings in and likely isn't going to give out a massive contract or a record-breaking contract to a player from an outside organization. So what are some of the underdog players? What about some of the underrated players that you may not have even heard of before but could come in and make an impact on the team like John Kaminsky and Isaiah Buggs did just this past season? Well, today we're going to talk about those players. We're going to talk about some of the underrated guys, some of the guys flying under the radar that aren't going to be as expensive, aren't going to be quite as productive or big name players, but can certainly still bring a lot of help to the Detroit Lions defensive line. So with that being said, we're going to ignore Daron Payne, we're going to ignore Javon Hargrave, and we're going to get to some of the lesser known players, starting off with Dalvin Tomlinson, defensive tackle from Minnesota. The 28-year-old defensive tackle, formerly of the Alabama Crimson Tide, formerly of the New York Giants, and most recently of the Minnesota Vikings, is set to be a free agent. And with big contracts looming over the Minnesota Vikings, with them not having very much cap space and having a new defensive coordinator, I would not be surprised if they let go a few key defensive pieces from last season's defense, including defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson. Now, Dalvin Tomlinson played in 13 games last year, having 42 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. He is not an elite pass rusher by any means, and he wouldn't really come in and be a guy like Daron Payne that can get you 12.5 sacks, or a guy like Jalen Carter that can come in and get you really good sack production, but he is a phenomenal run stopper with the ability to get after the passer a little bit. He's more of a pressure player, more of a player that collapses the pocket more so than actually getting home and finishing the play himself, which is a role that is needed on the Detroit Lions defense, and pairing him with Alim McNeill would be really sufficient for that. It would help the Lions stop the run much better than they did last season. And even last year, they showed a lot of really good flashes when it came to stopping the run late in the season. But adding Dalvin Tomlinson for a price tag that is right now valued at about $8 to $8.5 million a season could be a really good deal, right? It's not a massive deal. It's less than what DJ Chark got a season ago in the offseason. However, it would be a really big player for the Detroit Lions to add their defense, somebody that could come in and be an immediate starter and essentially doing everything Isaiah Buggs does, but at a higher level of success and at a better rate of play. So that is an option for the Detroit Lions. But what if they want to go really cheap? What if they want to spend league minimums and they want to go after players that you've never even heard the name of? Well, there's a couple players like that too. First off, we're going to talk about Michael Hoecht, the defensive tackle from the Los Angeles Rams. At just 25 years old, right, being that young player that Brad Holmes likes to bring in and being valued at less than $1 million a season, Michael Hoecht is coming off a season where he had 4.5 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, and 4 tackles for loss while playing just 38% of snaps for the Los Angeles Rams a season ago. And as I said, is only 25 years old with 2 years of NFL experience. Now, I'm not saying that he could come in and be a Chris Jones or a Daron Payne or even a top or even a starting defensive lineman, but this is a player that on 38% of the snaps, so not even a majority of pass rushing snaps for the Los Angeles Rams, had 4.5 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, even more pressures, as well as 4 tackles for loss, while being 25 years old, costing likely less than $1 million a season, and potentially being a rotational player who has pass rushing upside. He's a player that is extremely cheap, is extremely young, and has Brad Holmes' name written all over him. And again, he could come in and won't be as great as Daron Payne, might not be as good as stopping the run as a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson. But if you're looking for that cheap pass rusher for a year or two, I think Michael Hoecht could be a really, really good option, as he was very productive on extremely limited snap counts. Now, moving over to the AFC champions and the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, they also have a player on their defensive line who is pretty young, pretty inexpensive, and fairly productive. A guy like Kalen Saunders, the defensive tackle from the Kansas City Chiefs, is a little bit undersized at just 6 foot even, but standing at 325 pounds at 26 years old. Now, much like Michael Hoecht, he played just 39% of snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs a season ago, which was a career high. However, obviously isn't a significant amount of snaps. Now Kalen Saunders saw 8 quarterback hits, 3.5 sacks, as well as 3 tackles for loss on that 39% snap share, and was a pretty good pass rusher. He got penetration, he caused some pressures, played really good for the Super Bowl champions, and even though he didn't start any games, even though he wasn't a full-time starter or even a full-time rotational player, he was somebody that when his name was called, when he was put on the field, he made plays and helped get to the quarterback. And he was part of one of the most efficient pass rushers in the NFL last season. And even though he's not the big number guy, even though he's not Chris Jones and was overshadowed by a lot of his teammates, he is somebody that continues to stand out as a player that can make plays in the background and be the guy that does a lot of the dirty work, kind of like Isaiah Buggs, but with a little bit more pass rushing upside and a little bit more ability to get after the quarterback. Now, the last player we're going to talk about today is a player from the Tennessee Titans. Staying in the AFC, looking at Teair Tart, the 6'2", 304-pound defensive tackle from the Tennessee Titans. Now, Tart only came away with 1.5 sacks and 7 quarterback hits this year, and much like Dalvin Tomlinson, he is a player that is much more of a pressure, collapse the pocket type of player that does the dirty work but doesn't always get home. But what really stands out about Tart was the 6 passes defended, as well as an interception and fumble recovery. Now, Tart did start all 16 games for the Tennessee Titans, so it is possible they are going to want him to return. However, he should not be very expensive if he is to hit the market. And as I said, on 16 starts but playing just 47% of snaps, he came with a 1.5 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, even more quarterback pressures, 6 passes defended, so he has the ability to get his hands on the football, which is not a skill that every defensive lineman has, as well as, of course, an interception and a fumble recovery. He's a good athlete, received a 73.1 PFF grade by PFF a season ago, and could be a really good defensive playmaker for the Detroit Lions. Now, before the Lions go out and spend money in free agency, I think they do have to address the position in-house. I think they do have to re-sign John Kaminsky. I think they should look to re-sign Isaiah Buggs to a cheap contract. However, that doesn't mean they can't go look for role players and special teams players, right? That doesn't mean just because we have a defensive line that played pretty well last year, right? Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston, John Kaminsky, Josh Pascal. Of course, you have Ali McNeil. Hopefully Levi Onwuzurike comes back. That's a decent group of players with some decent depth. But if you want to continue to build up that interior, you can either build through the draft, which I think they will do, or look to sign some of the players that are on this list, right? Guys that are specialists, guys that haven't had the opportunity to succeed everywhere else. And when you look at the free agents that Brad Holmes likes to bring in, he likes to bring in low risk, high reward, players with grit, players with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, players that want to earn a big contract, players that want to show that they can play in the NFL, and that fits these players to a T, right? Dalvin Tomlinson is a little bit of a bigger name, and would be a little bit more expensive, but could be a huge upgrade, bigger than the rest of these guys. You have Michael Hoecht from the Los Angeles Rams, has just 2 years of experience, but has the ability to be a really good pass rusher, and showed last year that on just 38% of snaps, coming away with nearly 5 sacks and 9 quarterback hits with 4 tackles for loss. Somebody that can pressure the quarterback and put them under duress. Same thing with Kalen Saunders and Teair Tart, guys that aren't going to get you 10, 11 sacks like Daron Payne or Jalen Carter or even Javon Hargrave, but players that will continue to do their job incredibly well. And even though they won't show up on the stat sheet, I would take another John Kaminsky, I would take another Isaiah Buggs, and these guys could be the next players to fill that role. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think and what players you want to see the Lions sign in free agency. This is just a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a picture of what the Lions could be targeting, but let me know down in the comments below what you think the Lions should do. I'd be very curious what you guys think. With all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions.